Firstly, can I say good morning to you all and welcome to our webinar today. It's great to be joining up with one of our members, Pinnacle Growth Group, to lead this webinar, which is looking at how to use post-Brexit opportunities to enable business growth. We've worked with Pinnacle a few times over the last couple of years, primarily to help businesses prepare firstly during the transition period of Brexit, and also to explore the new opportunities and the new trading relationships as they evolve in the sort of post-Brexit period. But Pinnacle Growth are a much wider offering than that, and I'm sure they'll keep you. I know Judith's going to tell you a little bit more about their offering in a couple of minutes as well. Brexit's been a bit of a journey for all of us and for a lot of our members, and it's still very much a sort of evolving story. As a chamber, international growth and development was part of our founders' vision, and it's really very much still at the heart of who we are and what we do, and our work to ensure businesses can maximise opportunities and grow. So before I hand over, I'm just going to say a couple of house notes, just to keep you informed. We're recording the session today. It will be shared on the Chamber YouTube channel afterwards, but we'll cut out the Q&A section, so that please do feel free to ask any questions as we go along. Can I ask that you pop yourself on mute if you've not already, and if you can keep yourself on mute throughout the presentation part, but there'll be the opportunity to ask questions at the end. And please do use the chat function that we have available to us to enter questions as we go along. And I've just checked with Marcus, who's going to be leading the presentation today, and Marcus says that we'll be able to share the slide decks with you as well, just to help with your note taking as well. So I'm going to hand over to Judith Neal, who's the Head of Business Growth at Pinnacle Growth Group, to get our conversations underway today. So Judith, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Great, I can see the slides. Hopefully everybody else can. Yeah, that's great. So yes, I'm Judith Neal. I'm Head of Business Growth in Pinnacle Growth Group, and Marcus is a colleague of mine who's going to be speaking throughout the presentation. Primarily, the Pinnacle Growth Group are business advisors. We advise SMEs and larger companies on their growth journey and every aspect of that on the way. We are a small company based in Northern Ireland, but a small company that's growing exponentially. We have, as you can see from the slide, we've a board of directors, Alistair Hamilton being our chairperson, who actually was chair of Invest NI, one of the funding organisations in Northern Ireland. And then we have a team of business advisors and associates alongside, who can hopefully facilitate most aspects of your business and your business growth. Should it be HR, should it be Brexit support, should it be lean training, we have legal experts, we have economists. So the whole breadth of the team, which hopefully can facilitate most aspects of your business growth. The team, if you move on, Marcus.
Yep.
Oh, maybe I can do that on this. So we split our services into 3 pillars, just to really sort of divide up what we can offer. So finance for growth is one of the areas that we probably initially start with a lot of clients. And what it is we look at helping your funding journey to support your business growth. We access grants and funding from a lot of the larger organisations, should it be Invest NI in Northern Ireland, Scottish Enterprise. We look at Innovate UK and all other areas outside of that. And basically what we do is we help facilitate you applying. We plan it out so that at every option we can have you ready to apply for the funding opportunities. And also what we do is we align them, and we not only maybe are applying for one funding opportunity, but we could be applying for 2 or 3 at the same time as we go along. And this allows you to get almost running your business while we help to look at the support that is there. We also have the narrative around it to maximise all opportunities and ensure that you are applying to every funding opportunity that is available. Another area where within this finance for growth that is useful to have us on board is that a lot of the funding opportunities come out on a call basis. everybody's not aware of necessarily when they're coming out, and they're quite often only open for a short period of time. So what we can do is we have your company profile ready to go, and we're able then to literally get in at the first initial opening of the funding opportunity and get you in there ahead of the game. So it's another added benefit. We have the narrative around the funding opportunities and with the relationships within the team. So again, it helps your chance of success. We work on this in a couple of different models. If anybody's interested in hearing a wee bit more about it, my details will be shared at the end of the presentation, and anybody's very, very welcome to get in touch with me, and we can talk about how we the models that we work on in this and the opportunities that we can avail of you. But certainly if anybody's looking at increasing employee numbers, or looking at new processes, looking at R&D, looking at new computer systems and CRM systems, there's funding out there for all of that, plus other great, and net zero, there's funding opportunities there everywhere. It's a huge, and I think everybody's hearing it day and daily: sustainability, net zero, carbon neutral. It's just the buzzwords, and there's certainly, if anybody's looking at it, there's funding available, so it's always worth having a conversation, and we can assist you on that journey. Then I move on to business improvement. We look at all different programs and tools to help your business increase profitability and move you along on that growth journey. One of our major values is to add value to your business. So we look at where we can increase profitability, where you can look at your marketing strategy, where you can look at your HR, where if you're recruiting, the best way to do it. We can look at a program of, well, it's a in-house program that we look at, and we look at where you are now and where you want to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years, and we can look at how to get there, and then come in and assist you with the processes to be able to do that. And we want to take you from where you are now along that journey and support you every step of the way. So again, if anybody's interested in that at the end of the presentation, they can get in contact with myself or Marcus, and we will align you with the right person within the team to help you on that journey. And then we're looking at sales and export growth, which is probably aligns much more with what Marcus is going to talk about today. And you know, if people are looking at developing new export markets, or looking at trading with different markets, we can look at assessing just the best route to that market for you. We can help you at initial stage, or if you've already embarked on that journey, we can help you at any step of the journey along the way. We've worked with different clients, just literally, you know, going in and looking at market access, looking at what the best opportunities are, looking at your supply chain. So at every aspect of that journey, and again, Mark's going to talk about a lot more during the presentation, but anything that we can help you with along there, certainly get in touch again. Great, Marcus, you moving us on. So just, I suppose, just to highlight, although we're a small team, and I did mention at the start that the breadth of our experience and knowledge, I say our because it's my team who have all the breadth of and the experience and the knowledge, but we have, you know, the team within the capabilities, and also within the associates that we draw on. There's the legal experience, finance. We've just recently had a new associate join us who can look at all your finance, look at if you're the right banking model, and just your business is getting the best of your finance model. HR, governance, process, R&D, everybody's looking at new processes, especially aligned with the net zero. And again, we can look at all of that and look at the funding around it. Operations, collaboration, engineering and manufacturing. So there's a whole breadth and wealth of experience within the team. And one thing that we also highlight greatly, and when we're looking at these opportunities, if we're looking at your business improvement or your sales and export growth, we'll alongside that look at funding opportunities, which will hopefully pay for some of our time looking at that, so we can avail of funding to assist you so that you're not paying for all the services that we're doing. Now, none of those funding opportunities are guaranteed, but we will always, you know, be very clear at the start of that journey as to what, you know, what advantages you can have from that. So the team have great capabilities, and we can hopefully support you on your business growth. So that really gives you an overview of what Pinnacle Growth Group can offer to businesses out there. And if anybody wants any further information, even during the presentation, if an opportunity arises, just, you know, let me know and drop me an email, and we can have a further discussion. So I'll pass over now to Marcus, who's going to take over and continue. You've heard enough from me, and he'll come in with his expertise in the area.
Okay, so thank you very much, Judith, and good morning, everyone. And also thank you again to Glasgow Chamber, in particular Alan and Michael, for all your support in getting this event put together today. So as Judith says, my name is Marcus Lynn. I'm part of the team here at Pinnacle Growth Group, and my area is largely to do with sales and export growth out of the three sort of core areas you've seen just earlier in the presentation. What I'm going to talk to you today is a little bit about Brexit and post-Brexit opportunities in particular. So as with Glasgow Chamber, we very much want to help businesses look forward, obviously whilst remaining compliant with all requirements, looking forward to identifying any opportunities that there are ahead that could enable business growth. And so that's what this whole presentation today is going to focus on. So just a bit of a high-level summary of just what we're going to be talking about now. So first of all, I'm going to set the scene a wee bit more. So where are we now? Conscious the last year or so, COVID has taken over anything Brexit related, and there's been a lot going on. So just almost looking back a wee bit and just reminding everyone where we are, how we got to this point. Then looking a bit forward, looking at a few just different customs areas first and foremost. The reason being is not only are these now required as a result of Brexit, there's also areas, if you get them right within this, that will make it a lot easier for you to avail of future opportunities when you're exporting globally or even with the EU as well. Then we'll also look a wee bit about different opportunities with Brexit, well, post-Brexit opportunities, and also a few projects that we have supported on, just to give you a bit of a flavour of the work that we can do. So as I said, where are we now? I think it's always very helpful, even though we're looking more so at the opportunities for future, just setting the scene a wee bit more and saying, where are we and how did we get here? So going back to early 2020, which seems like a lifetime ago for, I think, everybody, the 31st of January 2020, the UK actually left the European Union officially after a number of years of negotiations between both parties. However, this was immediately sort of, they immediately entered into a transition period between the UK and the EU. And as part of that, basically all requirements remained the same. So in practice, most businesses within that time didn't actually see any changes in what they were required to do. From the 1st of January 2021, that's where changes began to take effect. So if you're, as a business, exporting actually exporting anywhere outside of the UK, for the 1st of January 2021, an export declaration would be required. Also, if you're dealing with control goods, so goods which have a wee bit more restrictions on them, in certain cases you were required from that date to do import declarations. The UK government, to support businesses, did introduce what they call a phased border operating model, which is basically was a way of supporting businesses get used to the new requirements. So for the bulk of 2021, the vast majority of businesses have had quite a bit of time to do, up to about 175 days actually to do import customs declarations. However, from the 1st of January this year, all import declarations, unless you're using certain customs procedures, are required immediately from the 1st of January 2022. So it's really important that if you are importing, whether it's finished products, raw materials, that you are aware of what you need to do to make sure you can still get your goods in on time. So customs declarations, just going to focus a wee bit briefly on this before we get into more of the opportunity side of things. So prior to Brexit happening, unless you were a company who was dealing with clients outside of the European Union, you probably would never have had much cause to deal with a customs declaration. However, if you're dealing with any businesses outside the UK, customs declarations will now be required. Typically, the first thing when you have a customs declaration is, do I outsource or complete in-house? Most commonly, most businesses do tend to outsource, although you can invest in software if you wish to do it in-house. But the key point is, even if you outsource a customs declaration, the responsibility for the completion and the accurate completion of that declaration still lies with you as the importer or the exporter. So it's important to make sure that all your information that you're providing to your agent or broker, freight forwarder, is correct, and and so you won't have any issues down the line in the event of any future inspections. Okay, so now key information required. So this is information not just from like an import perspective, if you're importing goods now that Brexit's happened, but also if you're exporting. This is some of the information that you're going to need to make sure you have to be able to avail of any future opportunities. Without this information, if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to get your goods moving, and any opportunities that do exist will be much more limited for you. I will touch base on some of these in a wee bit more detail here later in the presentation, but certain key commodity code, country of origin, very important areas. Gross and net weight, so that's the weight both including and excluding packaging of any product. Customs procedure code, that's an area that I've had a few questions on myself over the last few years. Basically, that is a specific code for when you're what customs procedure you're using. So are you bringing goods into the free circulation, inward processing relief, or other procedures? Incoterms, I will touch base on them a wee bit more here later on in the presentation. And then customs value. So basically, any goods you bring in or you export for customs will need to have a value. In a lot of cases, that would be the value that you basically pay for it, what's known as the transaction price. However, even if one query I've had a number of times over the last couple of years is, what if there's not a sale involved? So for instance, you're importing goods and that perhaps you have a premises in mainland Europe and you're importing them into your premises in Glasgow. In that case, there may not have been a sale, but when you're doing your customs declarations, you still need to assign a value to those. If any questions about how to determine what the value of your goods are for customs purposes, please get in touch with me and I can guide you through the process. I'm just going to go on to the next bit here. So commodity codes. So I thought it was important to touch base on this in a wee more detail. So a commodity code, when it comes to customs compliance, is about the single most important factor. This is important whether it's whether you're importing goods or whether you're exporting and perhaps trying to take advantage of new trade agreements that are in place. So basically, a commodity code is a unique numeric identifier used to classify a particular product. Within that, so what that means is basically a commodity code is a unique code that allows you to determine what tariff is applicable on the goods, what rate of VAT is applicable, are there any extra restrictions or certifications that apply, and also what are the exact requirements for determining the country of origin. So as you can imagine, it's a vitally important piece of information. And it's also critical that you get it right. This is an area that so many businesses can have challenges with. Happy to obviously have a chat with anyone who's struggling with this area. But basically, if you're exporting, you will have an 8-digit code. As an importer, you can be faced with a 10-digit code. So it's very important just to make sure you get it right. As I said, to get it right, there's a few different ways you can go about to check it. So there's a website, a UK government website called the UK Integrated Tariff website. This is basically a database of every single commodity code out there and all the requirements behind each one. Again, it is a very useful tool. I would highly recommend that you make use of it. If anyone is not familiar with it and needs a bit of advice on how to work it, I can certainly provide that advice. There is also a commodity code checker service with HMRC. That is not legally binding, but what way that would work is that you would send a detailed description of your products to this particular department in HMRC. They would come back with what they think is the right code. If you're still faced with uncertainty, you can actually get your choice of code be made legally binding through what's known as an advanced tariff ruling. This is, in my eyes, a criminally underused procedure. There's quite often commodity codes are not straightforward. You really need to know minute details sometimes about the products you're dealing with. So it is really helpful to get it legally verified if you have any uncertainty. Because if you choose the wrong commodity code, you can potentially pay, for instance, the wrong duty, and then down the line, when you get an inspection, you could be faced with an unexpected bill for any unpaid duty. And obviously, if that only occurs maybe a year or two down the line, you can't then go back to your customers and increase prices. So it is vitally important that you get it right first time, and then that saves any real problems. Just another point to note as well around commodity codes. So periodically, commodity codes are updated. The most recent update happened on the 1st of January this year. So if you as a business perhaps had a database of your commodity codes that you use, going back a number of years, it'd be important just to check that. You may have found, not all of them, but some of them may have changed in recent months. So sometimes only by a couple of digits, but it still may have changed. And so don't just rely on what you've been using before. Also, if a say a supplier, for instance, has given you an invoice which has a commodity code on it, make sure you check that commodity code, because you, as a business, you're the one legally responsible, even if that code a supplier gave you turned out to be incorrect. So I can't emphasize enough how important that is. Also, if you are dealing with trade outside of the UK and the EU, be mindful that there may be some regional variations in commodity codes, and certainly the last few digits of each commodity code, just to be mindful of that. But to summarize about commodity codes, the most important part of any customs declaration, and if you can get that right, you'll be in a good place to hopefully gain from some of the opportunities going forward, now that the UK has left the EU. Country of origin, this is another important area when it comes to all things customs and post-Brexit opportunities. So effectively, country of origin, some people just think that's where you've imported it from or where it was made. It's a wee bit more complicated than that. So the country of origin is effectively the economic nationality of the goods. Sometimes if you're dealing with, say, goods that were made exclusively in one country with parts all from that country, the country of origin is what's deemed to be wholly obtained, in which case it's pretty obvious what country you used, what is the country of origin. In other cases, the country of origin can be a wee more complicated to figure out. So in most cases, it will be based on what's called the country where the last substantial economic transformation took place. So that is basic in layman's terms. That's really where the last major changes to the product took place. Things like repackaging will not constitute a change in the country of origin. Just be mindful. This is very important for future opportunities. So if you have a trade deal in place, the country of origin of the product will determine whether you can avail of that trade deal. And so it's important to understand the specific requirements for each trade deal to be able to identify the right country of origin. Actually, just also on country of origin, depending on, say, where you're exporting to or where you're importing from, there may be different paperwork required to illustrate proof of country of origin. That could be anything from just your invoice or delivery document to what's known as an EU R1 form, or in some cases, there's other different types of forms as well. So again, either for yourself or through Glasgow Chamber, if you're unsure anything relating to country of origin, how to prove it, whether it means you can avail of any trade agreements, please get in touch and we can advise you accordingly. Incoterms. So again, this is another area that is vitally important to help businesses avail of post-Brexit opportunities. So Incoterms are otherwise known as international commercial terms. So the best way of describing these are basically the terms and conditions of trade between a buyer and a seller. So they're set down by the International Chambers of Commerce, and there's basically 11 different terms, 7 of which can apply to any form of transport, 4 only can apply to transport that is basically on water-based as such. Each of these 11 terms will have their own very specific rules as to who takes responsibility for what part of the trade, and and movement of goods. And so it's very important to consider what is the right Incoterm for your business. These will not be a one-size-fits-all policy. For different suppliers, or when you're trading with different countries, different terms might be more applicable. So it's important to consider, break down every goods movement that you do, and consider how much responsibility you want to take, how much risk do you want to take, and really make sure that's agreed well in advance of any goods moving with any suppliers or customers. And that should obviously be stated on all commercial invoices and any other customs paperwork as well. As I say, there's 11 different terms. If anyone's any questions on specific terms, happy to take them as well. But it's important, just I wanted to set out what they do and don't cover. So they do cover who is responsible for transport and arranging transport, who is responsible for completing any import or export customs clearance, where the risk transfers. So if you're buying goods off a business, at what point do you take on the risk? Or if you're selling goods, at what point do you take on the risk, and what point does it transfer to the other party? And also, if there's any costs arise, what point do you become responsible? It's important to note that Incoterms do not cover, so if there's any disputes in the following areas: price, so that's agreed separately, usually in a sales contract. Same with ownership transfer, also the method of payment and when it's paid, and also what documents should be provided to customs. So just be careful you don't try and use Incoterms to cover something where they're not meant to cover. But as I say, make sure these are all agreed in advance of any goods moving, and it will leave you in the best place possible to minimize any disruption and take advantage of post-Brexit opportunities. So now that's a very high level look at some of the customs requirements and some of the just at a high level to understand things that you can do to make your life easier and also help you avail of future requirements. This next section of the webinar is going to be slightly different in the sense it's going to look at some of the opportunities that are out there for businesses, both locally within Scotland and looking a wee bit further afield as well, just to really map that out for you. So the next stage is to talk about the opportunities relating to going forward. As Alan alluded to earlier, everyone's been thinking lately about COVID and survival. Now it's good to see what opportunities are there out there. So in late 2020, I think it was actually Christmas Eve 2020, the UK and the EU announced the agreement of a trade deal between each other, which is basically setting out the future terms and conditions of trade between the UK and the EU. This is known as the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, or TCA, which is just a fancier title for UK-EU trade deal. The key point of this trade deal is focused largely on movement of goods, in particular, that zero tariffs and zero quotas on goods moving between each jurisdiction, as long as it met the relevant rules of origin criteria. So when we chatted a bit about country of origin there earlier on, this is where that becomes important. So if you're, for instance, say importing into Scotland and you're importing something from France, if that's an EU origin product coming in, so if that product is French origin, then you will not be paying a tariff. If, however, that product is, for instance, US origin, but you're importing it from France, that would fall outside the scope of this agreement. So that's where it's vitally important to know your country of origin and know how to prove that. And as I say, it's quite a major thing. Obviously, EU's 27 countries, so that means if you can import from any of them without being subject to tariffs or quotas, that can be quite a serious financial saving for the business as well. Unfortunately, one of the areas that this agreement focused less on was trade and services. So a lot of businesses who are predominantly service-based sort of ask, what is the situation with us? I mean, it's a wee bit more complicated, and in some cases the rules can be a wee bit more industry specific, including certain rules for financial services, things like that. Just be mindful, for instance, certain things like recognition of professional qualifications are not automatically guaranteed and are all very much industry and country specific. There are also different rules in terms of business travel to the EU, particularly if you are going to spend greater than 90 days within the European Union. And that will need to be checked with the particular country where you're planning to spend that time. As I say, again, also be mindful of things like GDPR compliance, which at the minute is not too bad, but there is potential for future divergence within that. So just be mindful of that if you are a predominantly service-based organisation. So whilst that's the trade deal between the UK and the EU, obviously prior to Brexit happening, the UK were able to avail of any EU trade deals that they had with other nations. The UK have very much adopted a strategy of trying to get as many trade agreements in place as possible. So what they have done is they have agreed over 60 rollover trade agreements, which are it's basically a term for trade agreements which are along very similar lines as to the trade agreements that were in place with the EU. So as I say, over 60 countries have agreed at what's called a rollover trade deal. Again, I can provide you with a full list or answer any questions on a specific deal, but I've just included here some of the most common and some of the major ones that you might hear about. So Canada, Japan, South Korea, Egypt. So a lot of these will drastically reduce the amount of tariffs, like for instance, that you might pay when you're dealing with some of these quite major economies. Obviously, customs declarations will be required whenever you're trading outside the UK. Very few trade agreements will remove those requirements, but just be mindful of that there as well. But then, as well as the UK-EU trade deal and trade deals like rollover trade deals, the UK have also agreed a couple of trade agreements with countries which previously didn't have an agreement with the EU. So this will be very different to what was before. So one of the most talked about has been this UK-Australia free trade agreement, which was signed just recently, just a few months ago there in December 2021, which is quite a comprehensive agreement if you're trading with Australia. So it will remove all tariffs on any exports to Australia and the vast majority of tariffs on any imports from Australia, with a couple of small exceptions to that rule. So that if you happen to trade with Australia or you're potentially looking to trade with Australia, that can make it a lot more streamlined. Again, this trade almost covers some trade and services and particularly digital services and rules on intellectual property as well, which aims to make it easier to trade between them. So quite often when you think of trade deals, everyone thinks of what they call tariff barriers, which is obviously tariffs as such, but they think less of these non-tariff barriers, things like for trade and services or intellectual property rights. Particularly with Australia as well, also there's some focus on mobility of labour. So business travel, obviously with Australia had some very strict border regulations regarding COVID. They have now by and large been eased quite substantially, but even outside of that, provisions have been included in this trade deal, and some of this side of things is probably still a bit of a work in progress, but that we'll see hopefully easier business travel between both nations, and also easier for people under the age of 35 in both nations to live and work in the respective nation. So again, if you were, say, looking to send staff temporarily to Australia for a period of time, maybe to work on a specific project or something like that, this trade deal might make that slightly more straightforward for you as well. And then keeping with the theme of Oceania, the UK and New Zealand have recently, very recently actually announced a trade agreement. And again, all tariffs on exports to New Zealand have been removed. So things like clothing, construction, they'll be very much quite beneficial for them. There will be some streamlined customs procedures and various systems that New Zealand authorities use. And again, as with Australia, there's going to be some coverage for digital trade and business travel between both nations, which is gradually picking up as both of Australia and New Zealand relax some of their COVID travel regulations as well. Future developments. So if you follow any future developments, one thing you might hear a lot about is this Trans-Pacific Partnership. So what this is basically a partnership of nations located roughly around the Pacific Rim, who have a trade agreement in place that drastically reduces the number of tariffs and also makes it easier to trade between both nations with various other regulatory simplifications. The UK, despite not being around the Pacific Rim, has actually applied to join this scheme. Negotiations are ongoing. Early indications are that the UK's application has been viewed relatively favourably by a lot of these nations, but as I say, they're still ongoing, so we wait further news on that. But again, if you're looking to trade with any of these nations, this will hopefully make it a lot easier, not just in terms of reducing tariffs, but also some of these non-tariff barriers to trade, particularly in services, intellectual property, and perhaps even for some countries, certain labour mobility, business travel, things like that. So that's one very much to keep an eye on. Also, the UK are obviously in negotiations with a lot of other nations regarding both rollover trade agreements and new trade agreements. For instance, the United States has always been talked about as a potential trade agreement. That is still very much in the early stages of negotiations, but it's one to keep an eye on going forward. Then a wee bit closer to home this time. As part of their post-Brexit strategy, the UK government have announced the creation of a number of what are called Freeports. So Freeports are not essentially unique to the UK. There are quite a number of examples also globally. Best way of describing a Freeport is basically a special economic zone, typically located around some form of port, either an airport, seaport, rail, which in which basically certain rules around customs do not apply. So you will receive relief in terms of tax, duty, perhaps even business rates. The size of a free port can vary dramatically. Some estimates have been up to sometimes it's literally the immediate vicinity of a port. Sometimes it can be up to 45 kilometers away from that port. And as I say, if you're located within that, then certain rules around business relates, tax relief, and customs duty will not apply to you. Now, there's plans for up to about 10 free ports around the UK. As of quite recently, the UK and the Scottish government have agreed to establish a couple of these within Scotland, potentially more going forward. Alan's nodding his head here, as he's probably heard about this one before. So, so basically, as I say, applications are still ongoing regarding these free ports. They can, so they are hoping to get them active by 2023, probably spring 2023. So again, with no official word yet on the exact locations. Obviously, there's a bit of speculation as where they could be. But if you do happen to fall within, have a location within that free port, then, for instance, if you're bringing goods in, processing goods, you may be able to have relief from customs duty, business rates, things like that. So even if you currently fall outside of those, if it may be worth considering, then perhaps if it's worth getting maybe a premise within one of these ports. Significantly though, going beyond what a free port usually offers, the Scottish government have announced that there will be a major focus on net zero, on sustainability through these free ports. So there will be expectations as well around making sure your business is sustainable going forward. But again, this is, as I say, a more local opportunity, this one, but a really beneficial one if you can fall within one of these areas, particularly if you're importing and exporting quite a lot, and perhaps you're doing some form of processing. So for instance, if you're a manufacturer, you can import goods, and if you process them within this free port and re-export them, then there would be no customs duty, for instance, applicable, and perhaps other supports as well.
Marcus, I'm just going to jump in a wee minute just to let you know that it'll not surprise anyone on this call to know that Glasgow Chamber is sort of leading the call and the application to get to bring a Freeport to Glasgow, and there's loads of information on our bid on the Chamber website, and we're working with Peel Ports on that. But just so you're all aware that we're fighting the case to bring one of those ports to Glasgow.
Yeah, and I hope hopefully you'll be successful with that. I mean, as I say, obviously we wouldn't know just yet exactly how far beyond any port that Freeport would stretch, but if you happen to either fall within that or can secure a premise within that, there can be some serious cost savings as well from customs requirements, and also, as I say, business rates and other taxes as well. But and obviously with these the Freeports in Scotland as well, there will be a major focus on sustainability. So keep that in mind and how your business can take advantage of that. And also happy to have a chat with anyone around that if you have concerns about sustainability. Pinnacle Growth Group have supported a number of businesses in projects designed to help increase their sustainability, looking at more funding for more eco-friendly sort of equipment or practices and things like that. So more than happy to have a chat with anyone around that. And then we're going to go on to the next sort of section of the report here, so the presentation here. So as I say, just looking back on that one, so there's some major opportunities with trade deals already in place, trade deals that are going to still be under negotiation, and potential future trade deals. It's important to keep an eye on that, and the key thing is you make sure you meet the rules of origin criteria for a specific trade deal to make you avail of less tariffs. And obviously Freeports, we eagerly await the next update on them as well. So the next part of this presentation, I just want to obviously give you a bit more of a steer, just in addition to Judith's presentation at the start there, just a flavour of some of the projects that we've supported different clients with, just so you can get a bit of a steer of how we could best support your business. So obviously one area is very much customs consultancy. So for instance, well, we've provided customs consultancy to obviously organisations across the UK and Ireland on the vast range of requirements that take place now that the UK have left the EU. One recent example where we work with a Scotland-based organisation to help them understand customs and VAT requirements. That again, it can take, there's no one-size-fits-all approach with customs. It can take any particular form, but typically advice can include on commodity codes, how to identify them, how to verify them, training on just working your way around the various websites, the communication you need to have with suppliers and HMRC on that. And just minimizing the chances of any mistakes with that. How to determine the value of the goods. Again, it may sound straightforward, but it's an area that I've seen cause businesses a few challenges. So more than happy to take any questions on that as well. Customs special procedures. So that's something we didn't really focus too much on in this webinar, but there's a range of customs procedures that can allow businesses to reduce or minimize or sometimes just delay the amount of tariffs or the amount of VAT that they have to pay. Again, it really depends on the specific scenarios of the business as to which of those procedures they may be eligible for. More than happy if you're to have a conversation with anyone, particularly if you're, for instance, if say you're a manufacturing business and you're bringing goods in to process and export to a range of different markets, there may well be procedures in place that allow you to avoid having to pay any customs duty. More than happy to take you through on that. Incoterms, as we discussed earlier on, a big one for just determining the responsibility from buyers and sellers. Happy to again provide advice on any of that. And postponed VAT accounting which is a quite new thing that's taking place after the end of the transition period, that can drastically reduce the amount of import VAT you have to pay. Again, that's only, again, you could add country of origin into that. You can add any range of other customs areas. That's only a very brief steer as to areas that businesses need support on. More than happy to have a chat with anyone who, not just for compliance for sort of for Brexit matters, but also what can I do to streamline it going forward and make sure I'm fully compliant. More, so that's the first type of project that we're working on. The second one, new market development. So we had a client recently who was involved in boat manufacturing and had identified that a designed new type of a vessel, and basically he had a dream of exporting into Canada. So we worked with him to initially secure some funding to try and explore this, both for the design and also the market entry into Canada. Feasibility studies into different international markets, including the Canadian market, and identifying is it feasible. Market development strategies, looking at market entry, really trying to drill that down. What's the easiest way of selling into Canada? Also the export and logistics behind some of that. And we can also offer assistance with market visits. And one of my colleagues was recently over there with the client, meeting with interested parties, and that support is continuing ongoing. So, I mean, it's a really, if you're looking to expand into an international market, no matter where it is, whether it's somewhere quite close to home, perhaps even Republic of Ireland or the EU, even Northern Ireland, or whether you're looking further afield, Canada, somewhere maybe Asia, Australia, anywhere in Europe, we're more than happy to support you on that. And as I say, that can cover a vast range of areas, from just grant funding to help explore that, to market research, market development strategies, feasibility studies, and assistance and market visits. More than happy to have a chat with anyone who feels that might be of interest to them.
I'm going to jump in here one wee second, just about that particular project. Yeah. I actually spent some time both yesterday and this morning with this particular client, and that project out to Canada has been unbelievably successful for him. He's met loads of new people. Invest NI have been involved, and also then Invest out in Canada with their representative. There's a trip planned with the customers they met out in Canada to come over here and come over and visit the client over here, and prospects of huge business. And it was all facilitated by ourselves. The whole process, the organization of the whole trip was facilitated by ourselves. The client's just more than delighted, and the relationships have been built up on the organization of the whole project. So it's just to give you a wee bit more background on that project and just how successful it really was.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith. Then another, and again, these are only 3 examples of, there's a range of different projects that we can support on, but we also had a client recently, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, supply chain challenges in recent times, both due to Brexit, COVID, and some other factors, but transport costs and lead times, they were really struggling in their current supply chain. So they came to us and said, is there an alternative that we can source? So we obviously sat with them, listened very carefully to see what the requirements were, not just in terms of cost, but product quality, and all ethical requirements along with that as well. So the first thing we did was we undertook a market assessment of different international markets that we felt might be suitable, to try and narrow down the most applicable markets to consider. We also looked at detailed research in each market to try and identify a range of possible suppliers to present to the client, and again, engaging with those suppliers to get quotes and ensure that all other quality and safety and legal requirements are taken care of through that. And the end result is that the client will be able to hopefully source some cheaper, not just more cost effective, but also less products, but which continue to have the same very high quality and meet all their requirements whilst reducing their transport costs and lead times. As I say, it's an area that so many businesses are struggling with at the minute. Global shipping is a really challenging area still, and is going to be for probably some time to come. So if you are thinking that you're having real difficulty with getting products in, the price you're having to pay, more than happy to have a chat to discuss, is there a way that you can find alternative that meets all your requirements, but reduces some of the disruption that you've been facing as well. And then that basically concludes the presentation. I'm more than happy to take questions on any of the areas that we covered, from the custom side of things to the future opportunities, and also some of the projects we can support on as well.
Super. Can I just say a big thank you, Marcus, for taking us through the presentation
No
there.
problem at all. No problem
I don't know if anyone wants to ask any questions. If you would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand by going into the participants list and selecting the raise your hand icon, I think, which is at the 3 dots. When you go in there, but please feel free to do it. But Marcus, I'm just wondering if you could. I've got a couple of questions for you as well.
Yep.
What are you finding since we exited, since the end of the transition period and we completed the exit from the EU? What has been businesses' sort of chief frustration that you're having to deal with more? And what are you hearing from businesses that's driving demand?
There's a range of areas. So I mean, obviously, before the UK left the EU, unless you traded outside of the EU as such, customs would have probably been a very alien area to you. So it's understanding, for instance, some of your key things like your commodity codes, your country of origin, your Incoterms, really introducing these concepts in a lot of cases to businesses. Also trying to get people's knowledge refreshers if they've maybe dealt with it a long time ago. That's been a real frustration. Certainly commodity codes can be a real headache. Also, some businesses, I'd say, are maybe completing declarations in-house and I've never had to do that before. And that's been an area of significant sort of challenge as well. But with the right advice and taking the time to sort of map out your supply chain, I always say it's not just where you bring goods or where you sell goods, it's the how it gets in between can very much influence what customs requirements, what tariffs, what paperwork needs to be completed. By sitting down and taking the time to map that out, we can certainly really try and minimize a lot of the challenges and help you ensure compliance. Particularly as some of these things are, it's now more important than ever, because if you're importing into the UK, I have to have an import declaration done immediately. Last year, there was a bit of leeway in terms of the phasing in of declarations. So there was a bit of time to do import declarations. So that is an area of significant challenge as well. So if you don't have the declaration done, your goods will not either be allowed to board the boat, or it could be stuck in a port somewhere within the UK, which is not cost effective for anybody. And also just being mindful in case any of your products have any extra requirements that that you weren't maybe aware of, certificates or paperwork that's needed. So it's just making sure you know how to find all that information out.
Brilliant. So if that's the frustrations, Marcus, what is exciting you about this new period that we're now trading in? What is your most exciting project?
It's really quite exciting. The amount of trade agreements that are being put in place with not only nations that previously had a trade agreement, but new nations like Australia, New Zealand, potentially others down the line. There's some really exciting thing that will hopefully reduce the amount of tariffs quite significantly, but also the non-tariff barriers. So whilst I appreciate there's been a lot of frustration from certain service sector organisations regarding Brexit and probably the lack of clarity, certainly future trade deals, particularly around digital services, are covering that, providing ways to make that more streamlined. Going forward as well, in the coming years, there's discussion of what's called a single trade window, which is basically a mechanism whereby businesses can do all their customs requirements via one system. Currently, some businesses might have multiple systems, particularly if they're involved in certain sanitary or phytosanitary goods or other restrictions or goods that have other sort of restrictions on them. There may be multiple systems required. It's still potentially a few years down the line, but it's looking like it could reduce the amount of paperwork and increase the digitalization of customs, which is still a bit of an old-fashioned industry, reliant very much on lots of paperwork. So there's lots to be excited about, as well as things you need to be aware of going forward.
Super. Well, I have another question. It actually comes from someone who'd signed up to come today but hasn't been able to join us today. But one of they are looking to source a new supplier effectively, and they currently import fine china mugs, and due to an issue with a current supplier, they're looking to identify new suppliers. Is that something that Pinnacle might be able to help them with if I was to pass on your details?
Yep, absolutely. So as we discussed in that presentation, we're actually working with a client at the minute who are importing products and are suffering from the disruption to global trade with increased shipping costs, increased lead times, and we're working with them to source an alternative supplier that meets all their requirements. And that's not just purely cost requirements, but also very much quality requirements, because we very much believe you want a quality product, but also safety requirements, ethical requirements, making sure that that any future supplier that they get are doing things right, and as well. And so I said we've got experience with that, and we've had dealings with suppliers in a range of international markets across Europe, North America, and the Far East for that particular product. So we're more than happy to have a chat with them and see if that's an area that we could support them on.
Well, I'll connect you after this call, after this webinar, Marcus, with that company as well. But no, if there's no other questions, and I'm just conscious that time's marching on, and we as a chamber have a rule that we always finish on time. Can I just say a huge thank you to Marcus for taking us through that presentation, and Judith as well for sharing us a little bit about the activities the exciting activities that Pinnacle Growth Group are working on. And we very much, I know that you are over in Glasgow quite a lot, and we look forward to sort of continuing to work with you in the sort of years ahead as well, to continue to look at these issues. If anyone has any specific questions and didn't feel comfortable to ask it in the Q&A session, Marcus's details are there up on the screen just now, and we'll also share the slides and Marcus and Judith's details after this webinar as well, so that you can get in touch with them directly. Or feel free to get in touch with myself at alan.busby@glasgowchamberofcommerce.com, and we will make sure that the question gets forwarded on to them. But just a huge thank you to you both for taking the time to join us today, for taking our members and myself through some of the exciting opportunities that are emerging from the sort of post-Brexit world that we all live in, and thank you for that. And can also just say a big thank you to everyone else for joining us today. I hope you all found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you at another Chamber event soon. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.